What's new, interesting, and exciting? Are you staying over there?
No, I'm coming. I'm coming. For some reason, Lois's phone has been trying to connect for quite some time, but hasn't succeeded.
Who's phone?
Lois.
Ah. Oh.
Do you fall asleep in the middle of people's conversations?
I did last night when I was out to dinner with a friend. She didn't realize it. And it was only for a second. And I do it at work at my desk. I'll be scrolling. And if I'm scrolling for long enough, movement of the scrolling.
Yeah. Is
Not
it
at all.
possible you're not getting a good sleep at night?
I think I am, the few hours I get.
It could be that you're not. Maybe this is an indication that you're not sleeping as well as you think you are.
That's a possibility. Or the doctor's got me on a medication that's making me sleepy.
Well, that could also be.
I'll have to ask him about that because I looked it up and it's an iffy side effect of what I want. So Lois is having trouble.
Now she's on. Are you there, Lois?
I am here. I was just walking back and forth for a while. Hi all.
Hi. Hi.
Pacing.
Yes, well, kind of. So I didn't hear. Liz, are you all right? Is everything?
Yes,
Oh, okay. Good.
I'm fine. I just noticed lately I like to fall asleep in strange places.
So what she's saying is it's very possible she's about to fall asleep
Now,
during our class
Oh,
and
no,
that we
for
shouldn't
some
take
reason-
it personally.
for some
I
reason,
see.
I don't fall asleep here. I fall asleep when I'm scrolling something on the computer at work.
Really?
Yeah.
While
kind of
scrolling.
hypnotizes
I
me.
fall asleep while listening, but usually not while scrolling.
Oh, I fall asleep watching TV.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Oh, see, it's not
Narcolepsy?
narcolepsy.
Well,
Nah.
if you're doing it, the only way it would, I think one of the indications is that you'd be falling asleep in situations where it'd be very unusual to fall asleep. I think like mid-sentence, while you have a
Right.
spoon of food about to go into your mouth, or while you're driving or something
Yeah,
like
that gets a little spooky every once in a while.
But I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that. But that issue of sleeping, like, are you getting the sleep you think you are? I know that there are people who end up taking those sleep tests just to see if that they may not be sleeping as well as they thought they were.
Yeah. 11:30.
So,
Maybe I'm not getting enough sleep.
so I've been just working with this Rabbi Foreman idea. I shared it briefly with Lois in I think in the Rambam class. But I'm just working with the ramifications of this idea from Rabbi Foreman. Essentially, it is that the two stories of creation, you have the 6 days, and then Shabbos, which are in chapter 1.
Right.
Then you have the beginning, or Shabbos is really the first part of chapter 2. And then you have the a kind of second telling of the story, at least the creation of Adam and Eve, in chapter 2. And one of the features, the points of distinction between these, there's several, but one of the points of distinction he suggests between these two stories is that what was I talking about? Any idea? When those things, I got Shirley sent me a text, and when they come up, they shouldn't come up.
The distinction between.
Oh yeah,
one and
one of
two.
the distinctions between these two stories. I'm the one with narcolepsy. Apparently, I fall asleep in the middle of my sentences.
But
So
you just forget the same way we all do.
so the one of the distinctions between the two is how time is experienced. That in the first story, it talks about time as we experience it,
Right,
in terms
day by
of
day.
days. There's days, and there's like 7 days to the
Right.
week. It's time as we tend to experience, although people challenge whether or not those first several days are time as we experience it. After all, there isn't the sun and moon and the
Well, he has to
stars.
create it.
Right,
in
so
order
until
to
the fourth
create it,
day,
you
there's
pick
not a sun and moon and the stars, it calls it day. So, but anyways, it's sort of in the ballpark of time as we experience it. Whereas the story of the garden is not. He suggests that at the very beginning, it's telling us this when it says, these are, what I'm about to tell you happens in one day, is essentially how it starts off. These are the results of the creations of heaven and earth on the day they were formed or created. So he suggests that we are being told that a time from the perspective of this story, it's like all happening on one day. But that's not because it technically is happening within 24 hours. What it means is that from the perspective of the Garden of Eden, in that perspective, everything happens in one day.
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
Because he talks about it in one point. He calls it compressed time, or a pre-time, or in other words,
there's
it's
nothing. So they
right,
can do the whole thing in what they would say is a day
right,
in that element.
right. Because time isn't being differentiated
Right.
as it is with us. It's still, things are happening in sequence, one thing's happening after another. And you could say that that's really what time is, a way of talking about how one thing happens after another,
Right.
one thing's the cause of another thing. You could say that. So it doesn't mean, it's not really beyond time, but it's a different notion of time. And maybe even it's trying to approach so I get to do it in real life. I get to tell you, because I just sent this idea to Rabbi Foreman, and he already responded. Okay. So anyways, so that's what he wants to say. He wants to say that one of these distinguishing features of the second story is the way it talks about time, that everything is happening on one day. And you can do a lot with that. But one of the things, I was just talking to my son Moshe and I were sending WhatsApp voice messages back and forth to each other. You can't call that talking, but I guess you can call it communicating.
Yes, you definitely communicate.
All right. So he was asking me about the story about the tree. Hashem tells Adam, on the day you eat from that tree, you will die. right?
Right.
So the Ramban, Nachmanides, says that it doesn't mean you're actually going to die that day. It means you are subject to death. You become mortal.
Right.
And, that's almost, I would say, if that question has been asked 10,000 times, that Ramban has been quoted 10,000 times
Right.
to respond to
Absolutely.
it. That's like the answer to that question that is typically given. The thing is that even if it's not the push-up shot. It's not the simple reading of the verse. It says on the day that you eat it, you will die. It sounds, so you'd have to say,
you take a bite and you drop dead.
right. Not everything has to be literal, and it could be that this is a kind of poetic language, and that's what the Ramban means. But I was suggesting to Rabbi Foreman that you could say that this is that phrase, because everything happens on one day in the garden. So when he says on the day you will eat from it, you will die. Yeah. Everything happens on one day.
How long is that day?
Right. Everything happens on that day. So what the Ramban's doing, he's sort of translating from garden speak to our time-bound world. Right. So that's what I asked him. So let's see what he responded. So I'll read to you the actual text that I sent Rabbi Foreman.
Okay.
According to your teaching that the events of the garden in Bereshis Perek 2 are a description of the world from the perspective of compressed time, or perhaps before time, could that account for Hashem warning Adam that on the day he eats from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, he will die? You have quoted the Ramban as explaining that it doesn't mean you will actually die on that day, but you will become mortal or subject to death. It will take time before you actually die, but the change that will allow for that has occurred the moment you ate from the tree. After you live with that Ramban for a while, you still have to admit it isn't the simple meaning of the pasuk of the verse, ... unless you account for the fact that everything that happens in the garden is happening on one day. From the perspective of the garden, it is always one day. The Ramban's explanation takes account of that and is merely translating from the perspective of the Garden of Eden to our time-bound existence. Response from Rabbi David Foreman. Hey, Rabbi Karsh, it's great to hear from you, and I absolutely love that idea. I think it is a profound insight, and to me, it seems to fit like a glove with the theory of World 2 being a vantage point of compressed time or outside time. Yes, thank you so much for this. I was...
Wow, he really didn't like it, did he?
He did not. Did not. He also responded within...
Half hour.
I sent it 9:58 and I got the response at 10:07.
Wow.
So I will say that, first of all, it's his idea.
Yeah.
It's an application of his idea. And
Right.
It also has to do with, I love the fact that Moishi was the one who asked me this question. So now I'm just
Now you
going
have to
to
forward
forward that to Moishi. All right. So, but I'm saying once you live with this idea, there's so many things that start to be available.
Yep.
And another one was, and this was the one that I was, here, let me just send this to Moishi. See if it actually went.
No, I can't forward. When I have email on my phone, I go to the computer when I have to do anything with it. Oh.
All right. Anyway, so the other idea was also from a Moishi question, which was Moishi was asking that when it comes to Shabbos, we are told 6 days you will work, and on the seventh day you will rest. One of the terms for work is avodah. Sheshes yomim ta'avod. 6 days you will work, avodah. That word translates as work. Some people distinguish avodah and melacha. Avodah as laborious, like an eved, like a servant, like and melacha as creative, like a combination of mind and brawn, brain and brawn. But anyways, it says 6 days you will work, avodah, and then on the second, so sheshes yamim tasa, sheshes yamim tavod vasisa kol malachtecha, you will do all of your malacha. The yom hashi Shabbos l'Hashem Elokecha. So you're going to rest. So you're not going to ovade. Okay, you're not going to work. Right. 6 days, you are not going to work, and on the seventh day, you are going to rest. 6 days you're going to work, and on the seventh rest. Okay. Now, there is a kind of work that is done on Shabbos, even though we're not supposed to work. What is that? The work in the Beit HaMikdash, the work in the temple. That is done even on Shabbos. We've already talked about the Tamid offering. The Tamid offering is the everyday offering that is brought in the morning and in the afternoon. That is brought 365 days a year. Doesn't matter if it's Shabbos, Yom Tov, Yom Kippur, doesn't matter. There's a lamb that's brought in the morning and a lamb that's brought in the afternoon. Those are the everyday offerings. So, and we call, but anyway, so we call that avodah. We call it the service in the Beit HaMikdash is called avodah. So on the one hand, you're saying 6 days you should work, on the seventh day you shall rest, but it's not technically true. It's not completely true. It's not completely true, because the avodah is done in the Beit HaMikdash on Shabbos.
And somebody has to be there to do it.
Right. And they are representing the entire Jewish nation when they do it. So when we call our prayer services, we are borrowing from that language. What we do when we pray is parallel, modeled after, to some degree, what was done in the Beit HaMikdash. We have Shachrit, we have morning services in the Beit HaMikdash, because the Tamid was in the morning. We have Mincha in Shul. We have Mincha prayers that relate to the afternoon Tamid. They correspond. Our service, our prayer service, is parallel to and modeled after, to some degree, the sacrifices that we're having in the Beit HaMikdash. That's called avodah, and this is called avodah. The Gemara calls it avodah shebalev, the service of the heart. But if you ask, what is the quintessential avodah? What is, if you were asking, what is quintessential avodah? You would say it. You'd have to say that it is the service that was done in the Beis HaMikdash. And if that is avodah, then when it says in the Torah, Sheshes Yamim Tavod Vasisa Kol Malachtecha, 6 days you will work and do all your work, and then on Shabbos you're going to rest from avodah. Why are we doing avodah on Shabbos? That was Moshe's question.
That's a good question.
Yes. So Rabbi Foreman's compressed time thing gives a path to understand it, but it is a deep path. Yeah. It is a very deep path, because anytime you're talking about a different way of viewing time, you have to like bend your mind a little bit. But the way, but his source text for
Yes.
this is not about the Beis Hamikdash. His source text is about the Garden of Eden, because in the Garden of Eden it says, like in, you know, when it starts talking about the placement of man in Gan Eden, it says he was placed there la'avda u'lashamra. He was placed there to work and to guard, work and guard.
Right.
Right. So Rabbi Foreman juxtaposes that phrase with the 10 Commandments mentioned in Deuteronomy. In the 10 Commandments that are mentioned in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, that's where it says, Shomar es Yom HaShabbos HaKadsho, guard the day of Sabbath. There's two different renditions of the 10 commandments, the 10 statements. There's one in Exodus, in Shmos, and there's one in Devarim. In the one in Exodus, it says, Zohar es Yom HaShabbos HaKadsho, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. The one in Deuteronomy says, guard the Sabbath and keep it holy. And that's why he's focusing on that one, because it uses the word guard to characterize how we are going to live Shabbos. How are we going to live Shabbos? We are going to guard the experience. We are going to guard the time, the time. How do we guard the time? By not doing what we do during the week. That's how you guard it. You guard it by keeping away those elements that would interfere with Shabbos. So we stand guard, as it were, on Shabbos, so therefore we're not doing the stuff that we do during the week. So that's Shamar es Yom HaShabbos HaKadsho. And then it says, Sheishes Yomim Tavot, 6 days you will work, on the 7th day you will rest. So that means, how do you guard it? You guard it by not doing the work. So the word guard, which means not to do the work, and the word avod, which means to do the work, have, their own meanings in context. But in the garden, he does them both together. It says he's brought into the garden, la'avda, to work it and to guard it. So somehow in the garden, you can do both at the same time. This is part of that paradoxical nature of a world with compressed time. That part of our difficulty in understanding compressed time would be to understand how you can both cease to work and work on the same day. How can you do both on the same day? How can you be doing them both at the same time? But so this is one of the anomalies, but also one of the characteristics of a world in what he calls compressed time. That somehow you're doing them together. In our world, we separate them. There are 6 days when you do work, and there's a 7th day when you rest. But in his world, like in the compressed world, you somehow could do them together
All at once.
Right. So that's the garden. That's the garden. Yeah. But he also said in other places that in a certain way, the design of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, is like the garden. That there are elements of the Mishkan where there's a breakdown. There's a breakdown in space and there's a breakdown in time. That as you are entering, as you're going deeper into the Mishkan, the place of the Mishkan is sort of almost like an embassy in time. The Mishkan lives in our world, but its nature is God's world.
Yes, there's so many miraculous things, like the space of the table that doesn't take up space.
Yes.
Okay.
So the space things he's saying, it's challenging space, and it's in a certain sense you could say it's challenging time.
Yeah.
So just like the garden can have ula avda ula shamra to work it and to guard it together, so the Mishkan can have it. So weirdly, for the rest of us, when we're keeping Shabbos, there's a clear distinction between what we call avodah and what you call shmirah. In other words, there's 6 days you do avodah. The 7th day you rest, you guard from it, or so you're not doing it. So in our world, it's like that. But as you get into the Beis Hamikdash, into this kind of, we'll call it an embassy in time, where it has elements of its nature that are drawn from a time above time, or a place above time. So, and therefore you can have both avodah and Shabbos together,
Right.
which you could not have in any other realm.
Right.
So-
And the other, because we've talked about before about the cherubim,
Yeah,
a graven image could be there, a different, but not in the things we make,
right,
but they're miraculous, I guess.
right. So that we have to see, because in other words, not all graven images are forbidden. Certain graven images are forbidden. And
okay.
it would also depend on your motivation. That's what you'd have to say. I mean, yeah, I mean, that can that fit into this discussion as well? I don't, we'd have to see. Maybe, I don't know. You'd have
Yeah.
to think about whether that fits into this discussion as well.
Can I ask
Yeah.
something that I really think this is really interesting about compress, but could also the fact that it looks so different, the time looks so different in the garden, is telling us that this is allegorical? Could that be? I mean, I know that's going in a different direction, but in
Right,
other words,
but-
we're supposed to gain from that this is different. This is very different. It's telling us it's an allegory in a way. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. The thing is with allegories is how removed are they? How removed are they? That's the thing that makes people uncomfortable, is
Right, from reality,
removed
what
are they?
really happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but I think so. It was like also Rabbi Foreman, I remember years ago, I'm sure you were at that Shabbaton where remember there was a Shabbaton where he was the scholar, and it was like in Pearlstein or something.
Yes, a
Remember
long
that?
time.
Long time ago. So one of the things he said was, there would be clues in the text if you're supposed to think of it allegorically. There should be clues, sort of like what Lois is saying now. There should be clues. So let's look at the garden story and see, are there any clues that this might be an allegory? Well, there's a walking, talking snake. There's a tree of knowledge of good and evil.
There you go.
Those might be clues to us that this is supposed to be taken as allegory. But again, the area, of course, the minute you say something in the Torah is allegory, it causes, and it should, I guess, it causes people to be nervous, because if you apply that without care, you can do away with the import of the entire
you can
Torah.
also explain it that God created a walking, talking snake and then took all that away from him.
Right,
when
and you could,
sin.
but the question is, do you have to? Like, so for instance, at one point it describes going out of Egypt. In the Torah, it says God took us out on the wings of eagles. So there, nowadays, when we've seen Harry Potter and we've seen Lord of the Rings, so we have now had an opportunity to see what it looks like when people are
Taken
flying
out of the
on
wings
very
of
large
eagles.
birds, but most likely
Right.
that doesn't mean that we actually were taken out. So you
Right.
could say, yeah, when it obviously is allegorical, then we say it's an allegory.
I guess
Right.
what I'm saying is
Yeah.
that the time thing might just be another
Yes.
clue.
No, I agree.
Yes,
I agree. I agree with you.
yeah.
But where
because-
you run into issues with people is when you say, even when you say allegory, do you mean there are no elements of of uh, of reality associated, what we would call reality associated with it?
I know.
It just,
I know.
I know, but yes, but he had already suggested there are other clues as well, and I like that this would be something you would add to it that would suggest that we can't read this just literally. We have to see it symbolically to some degree.
That's
Right.
Like
But
the
that connection with the Beis Hamidrash, and that is so beautiful that you'd want to
agree.
see it that way.
I agree.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah.
And he also, like when he's in the middle of doing one of these things, like first of all, that series of lectures that I was responding to, he gave several years ago. So I'm in real time referencing something he said several years ago to him. To me, it's fresh. It's like I heard it from him yesterday.
You compress
He-
time.
I
Yes,
compressed time.
compressed time.
That's it. Our discussion is exactly, it mirrored it, but I love the fact that he really is holding, like in anything, in any of these things, when you watch him teaching it, it looks like he's just sort of toying with it. He
Yeah,
doesn't, you're not sure.
how long he's been thinking about it.
Exactly.
It's like,
Yeah, maybe it's like that. And then he'll have like one of these demonstrations with a chart, and he'll start showing you like 100 different little indicators back and
Yes.
forth. Then you're thinking, yeah, he has spent more on this than I thought.
Yeah.
And then whenever you ask a question on it, it can come back like that, like immediate, like
Yeah.
he's holding it, which is also very
He's right
cool.
there with it in his mind at the same moment.
Yeah. So, and I love when he's especially picking up on something that once you look at it, suddenly there's all sorts of different things you can do with it, which is also cool. But one of the things that happened in those discussions was a comment by Bobby. Remember Bobby? She's one of the women who's always talking up in class.
Yeah.
Bobby. So they're talking about the differences between the garden description, at one point, the garden description and the first description. And one of the things she points out is that in the first description, God is characterized as by his voice, and God spoke, God spoke, God said, God said. In the second description, you have both his voice and his breath. But his interaction with us, it's just sort of interesting. His interaction is from his mouth. That at one point it says, and God's voice was moving in the garden, whatever that means. God's voice is moving in the garden. And he says, where are you? So it's like, it sounds like he's expecting to take a walk with Adam in the garden.
Yeah.
But where is Adam? They're supposed to meet up, and where is Adam? That's what it sounds like happened, right? So if Adam is walking in the garden with God, he's walking with his voice. So it's like, how do you interact with God, or how would you characterize the experience with God? Is that you're walking with his voice. And how did Adam come into being? He comes into being with his breath. So we have God's breath and God's voice. Now she didn't say this in particular, but there are places where it says like where God says up to Moshe, he says about Moshe, he says to Miriam and Aaron, you're not like Moshe. I speak to him mouth to mouth. So it's sort of interesting because she has sort of highlighted breath and voice. That's how we connect to God. He breathed into us, we come into being, and his voice is, and so we connect to him, but through his breath and his voice. And then when he characterizes his interaction with us, he talks about it as mouth to mouth. Pe el pe adaberbo, which is perfect. It's perfectly. So that was another beautiful, just something from, I don't know, there's sometimes where it's absolute. The other thing was, Estelle's not on, I guess she's still in England, but Rabbi Tatz he just came out with another book, and he sent me one. And he said it's called Shabbos and Festivals. Apparently what happened was, for several years, he had told me about this several years ago. I didn't know it ended, but several years ago, a group of people started a little minyan, which I think took place either in his house or somebody else's house. They were mostly South Africans, and who happened to be in London. So they were looking for a place to gather for davening, and so they gathered, and he became the sort of rabbi of this minyan. And it went on for several years until it got bigger, and then it needed to
Get a big space.
right.
a real
And so
space.
they merged with some shul that already is in existence, and obviously that was the end of this era of his shul. So he decided, I guess when they knew this was happening, he or one of them suggested, why don't we write a book and let the book be the product of our group? Like, so that's what this book is. In fact, he writes, the publication of this book has been kindly sponsored by, and it has a list of all these people. And the reason I am bringing this up is because the top name here is Asherson.
Oh,
It has to be her family.
it could very
Her
well be,
family's in London. They're South Africans.
right.
Right. I am assuming that these are her family, and they're part of,
It could very well be.
yeah. So I'm assuming.
Must ask.
So when she comes back to the class, I'm going to ask her about that.
Yeah.
It looks like that her kids were part of that minyan with Rabbi Tatz, which would be cool.
Yeah.
Is that her maiden? Is it, I mean, I don't know.
Her, no, I mean I'm assuming
would
that
be
her
her
kids
husband's
are
family.
Asherson.
Right.
So her son
Yeah.
would be Asherson.
Yeah.
Ah,
Absolutely.
So I'm assuming it's her son who was part of this minyan.
Yeah, could very well be.
And that's the end
Well,
of the
how long ago
assumptions.
was it?
This is just now. I mean, when did it end?
Yeah, when did
I don't know. The
the
book just came out now.
but how long was this?
He says,
group?
this book is a project of a minyan. My family were privileged to host the Shabbos minyan in our home for some years. They were precious time. Eventually the minyan outgrew its home. Wishing to acknowledge and perpetuate our time together, we felt that an ideal way would be to publish a book about the depth and beauty of Shabbos. My family and I are greatly indebted to all the members of our minyan for the privilege of being its home for the time it existed and for the cooperation that resulted in this book. And many
Could
people
very well
helped.
be her son.
I'm indebted to the members of our minyan, as mentioned above. And
Liz, we have to write a book, starting with Rabbi Karsh.
Yes.
at this point, Lois, I'm sure you have enough material for
Yes.
several books.
Oh, boy.
From all the different people you've been studying with over the years, you
You
could
write bits and pieces of all the different rabbis, all the different groups.
you have like enough for an encyclopedia or a bookcase of information.
It's true. Just the anecdotes.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, just,
David,
could I
hello.
ask, since I know it's a woman's class or whatever, or something, but since I'm here and since you were talking today about the stuff you had talked about yesterday, let's say I want to go to the temple. I just want to pay a visit. It's not one of the festivals. Do I have to bring an appearance offering?
on a
Yeah,
festival.
for sure on a festival.
Yes,
The question is, if you're not on a festival,
yes.
it does sound like that from the, it sounds like from the text, it says you should not appear without an offering. The question is, do you always have to bring, let's say you're going for a different offering. Let's say you're going for a Thanksgiving offering.
Hmm.
So you're asking, if you're going for a Thanksgiving offering, do you always need to bring a appearance offering?
Or what if I just want to show my kid? I want to show you the temple.
Right. So there, and you're actually going to go into the courtyard. You're not just going to go, because
Right.
you could. There was a place where even non-Kohanim and Levim could go in the courtyard. So let's say you're pure and you just want to go into the courtyard to witness it. You're allowed to. You're allowed to. So you're asking, do you have to, if you're going to do that, do you have to bring a korban re'iyah? And I'm going to say my gut suggests that you do not, but I don't know how I would know that right off the bat. I mean, we could definitely look up korban re'iyah. My problem was yesterday, I tried to look up korban re'iyah and I didn't, I wasn't spelling it right. But let me just see here. Let's just try this again. I'm just going to write the sacrifice of appearance. I just have to get close enough where some article actually tells you how everybody else calls it.
Oh, by the way, I'm going to send you an article. It's all about allegory, and when you're allowed to use that exegesis, and it's from your favorite source, Hartzion.
Oh, nice. Nice. Oh, I love to see that.
It's really good. Really.
Okay. Korban re'iyah. Okay, why you Torah? The problem is those are discuss the daf, children in the korbanos in the midbar, see Masechet Chagiga. All right, so I did get the right spelling now. So now the question is, only pilgrimage. This is very iffy. Pilgrimage festivals, seeing God or being seen by God, Torah musing. All right.
Good, good.
The Torah musings. Elyokim Krumbine. Our parsha concludes with the mitzvah of Aliyah L'Regel, the obligatory pilgrimage to Jerusalem 3 times a year. This mitzvah is repeated several times throughout Chumash, each time in a similar expression, 3 times a year. All your males shall be seen before the Lord your God. As in our parsha, this verse closes the discussion of the festivals. However, one view in Chazal points to yet another instance in Chumash where the mitzvah is introduced in a context seemingly unrelated to the festivals. Toward the ends of Parsha Mishpati, Moshe conducts the ceremony of the covenant between God and Bnei Israel on Mount Sinai. As part of the ceremony, we are told he, Moshe, designated some young men among the Israelites, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed bulls as offerings of well-being to God. The Gemara in Chagiga presents 2 views as to the identity of these burnt offerings. One opinion associates this sacrifice with the Korban Tamid, the daily offering brought each morning and afternoon, while the other identifies this burnt offering as an Olat Re'iyah. The Olat Re'iyah is a sacrifice required of every pilgrim to the temple on the festivals. In accordance with the dictum, they shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. Now, the question to be asked of this latter view is, how could one bring a pilgrimage offering during a time other than a festival? So he's understanding that it is only brought when you go up for the festival. Rashi, in his comments to the Gemara in Chagiga, explains the second opinion. Although this occasion was not one of the required pilgrimages to the temple, the offering on Ola Re'iyah was nevertheless warranted, since this experience too involved beholding. And they saw the God of Israel under his feet. There was a likeness of the pavement of sapphire. They beheld God and they ate and drank. Rashi's interpretation, however, seems quite difficult. A clear distinction exists between the beholding during the festivals, which involves the people's being seen by the Almighty, and that of Mount Sinai, where the people beheld God, as it were. The question then remains, why do Chazal relate these two sacrifices with one another? This enigmatic passage in the Gemara calls our attention to the unusual wording of this mitzvah. The verse literally reads, all your males shall be seen the face of God. Yira'eh is in the Nifal construction, which does not jibe with the et following it. Seeing the face of God would read Yir'eh et pnei Hashem, not Yira'eh. Being seen before God would be Yira'eh lifnei Hashem.
Yes,
There's a kind of mixture. But what is meant by Yira'eh et pnei Hashem? It seems like a weird combination. Shall be seen the face of God. Similar to the events at Mount Sinai, there are other instances in Chumash when God's face is said to have been seen. Gotta love this. It's almost like we were just talking about. I was talking about panim, seeing God's face, panim, but I was really talking about mouth, not just face, mouth. In Parshas Vayishlach, Yaakov proclaims after wrestling with the angel, I have seen God face to face, and later Esav, for to see your face is like to seeing the face of God. This concept appears in one other context in the Chumash, namely the Kedas Yitzchak. Avram named that site Hashem Yir'eh, God, literally God will see, whence the present saying on the mount of the Lord.
God will be seen.
Right. Here, for the first time, we find the concept of seeing in the context of the temple site, and furthermore, the relationship, or perhaps the play on words, between the object and subject, the one who sees and the one who is seen. The seeing in the beginning of the verse, Avram's names for the mountain, God will see, is clearly a reference to his earlier remark to his son, God will see to the sheep of his burnt offering. Most likely, as Rabbi Yoel ben Nun posits, the verb re'iyah in the story of the Akedah denotes choosing and selecting rather than seeing. God chooses a sacrifice, Yitzchak, and now God chooses that spot as the location for the sacrifices. Thus, Hashem Yireh constitutes both a parallel and precedent to the term, the place that God will choose, which appears numerous times in our parsha. However, what is meant by the end of the verse, whence the present saying, on the mount of the Lord, he will be seen? At first glance, this verse seems to prophesy about a later period when the people will ascend the mount of the Lord in order to be seen thereupon. And thus the pronoun is he with a lowercase referring to man. The problem is that nowhere in this verse is the subject the person mentioned. Thus it seems that the one being seen in this verse is none other than the Almighty himself. He, with a capital H, will be seen. Indeed, this is how Rashi, as well as many other commentators, interpret this verse. The mountain upon which the people of all generations will say, on this mountain God appears to his nation. This verse then sheds light on the grammatical enigma of our phrase, all your males shall be seen the face of God. This phrase implies both seeing as well as being seen. God not only sees man, but he is seen by man as well. He reveals himself to man and is thus seen here on the mountain. If we continue along the lines of Rav Yoel ben Nun's approach cited above, then we may conclude that the temple is the place of the renewal of God's choosing of his nation, and for our choosing God. As such, the end of the parsha directly relates to its opening. See this day, I set before you blessing and curse, which seems to allude to a later verse in Devarim. I put before you life and death, blessing and curse, and you shall choose life. The triumphant pilgrimage to the temple constitutes a renewal of the bond between and mutual selection of Am Yisrael and their Father in heaven. Another basis may be suggested as well for the peculiar expression, be seen the face of God. The very concept of seeing God poses a serious theological problem, as God possesses no visible form. The expression shall be seen the face of God may very well express the hesitation of the Torah as well as the student with regard to the institution of pilgrimage. the sacrifices offered and the festive celebrations associated with. Such festivities in the presence of God may result in a certain reverence towards God. Unquestionably, the experience of they beheld God and they ate and drank poses great danger. The Torah therefore substitutes yireh, shall see God, with yera'eh, will be seen. Similarly, elsewhere in our parsha, the Torah makes a point of entrenching with us the concept of yirah, fear of God, within the context of a pilgrimage to the temple. You shall consume there in the presence of the Lord your God, in the place where he will choose to establish his name, so that you may learn to fear the Lord your God forever. So this was originally in that virtual Beit Midrash as well, apparently, this Crumbine thing. But we can deduce from this article that you only bring the Korban Re'iyah at pilgrimage festivals, that it's only being asked of you at pilgrimage
That's what it
festivals.
seemed to imply.
Right, and that when you go other times, it's not. But we still don't have the exact thing that clearly says that, but you can deduce that from there, I'm thinking. Okay, Reb Eliakim Crumbine is the guy.
Crumbine?
Crumbine, Krumbein.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so we are
Lost.
in Bamidbar, and we were talking about the Levim, the Levites, and we were talking about the counting of the Levites. We were talking about how the Levites replace the firstborn,
Right.
and all the various conversations that came out of that. There was a lot that came out of that. It tickled my curiosity and led to a whole series of wonderful exploration and adventure into the discussion of the Levites replacing the firstborn. And then I think we're in chapter 4. Chapter 4.
Do they have signs saying the Levites will not replace us?
David just asked if they had picket signs saying the Levites will not replace us. Okay.
That's good. I like it. A replacement. Right.
Reading glasses.
Okay. Lois, do you want to read a little of chapter 4 just to get us going? We're just going to read a little bit of it. We'll come back to it afterwards, but just so that we can plant our flag in chapter 4.
Wait, that's the beginning of Naso?
Yes.
So no,
Yes.
Oh,
is it?
where?
No, it's the end of Bamidbar. I mean, it's like Shvi of Bamidbar. So it's chapter 4.
The beginning of chapter 4 in Bamidbar.
Yeah.
All right. Hashem spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, take a census of the sons of Kohath from among the sons of Levi, according to their families, according to their fathers' households, from 30 years of age and up until 50 years of age. Everyone who comes to the legion to perform work in the tent of meeting. This is the work of the sons of Kohath in the tent of meeting, the most holy. When the camp is to journey, Aaron and his sons shall come and take down the partition curtain and cover the ark of the testimony with it. They shall place upon it the tachash hide covering and spread a cloth entirely of turquoise wool over it and adjust its staves. Upon the table of the showbreads, they shall spread a cloth of turquoise wool and place upon it the dishes, the spoons, the pill. That's what I was doing this morning, and the shelving tubes, and the constant bread shall remain on it. They shall spread over them a cloth of scarlet wool and cover it with a cover of tachash hide and in place its staves. They shall take a cloth of turquoise wool and cover the menorah of illumination with and its lamps, and its tongs, and its spoons, and all the vessels of its oils, which they minister to it. They shall place it and all the utensils into a cover of tachash hide, and place it on the pole. Upon the gold altar, they shall spread a cloth of turquoise wool and cover it with a covering of tachash hide, and in place its staves. They shall take all the utensils of the service with which they serve in the sanctuary and place them on a cloth of turquoise wool and cover them with a covering of tachash hide and place them on a pole. They shall clear the ash from the altar and spread a cloth of purple wool over it. They shall place upon it all the utensils with which they minister upon it, the fire pans, the forks, the shovels, and the basins, all the utensils of the altar, and spread over it a covering of tachash hide, and in place its staves. Boy, Kohath is what a great work. What a great
Yeah.
thing to
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, should I go on?
No, I think we'll stop here. We're going to go back and look at it. Tachash is one of those animals that gets a lot of different translations, but several of them are waterproof. Several of them indicate that the nature of the tachash hide is such that it would protect from rain. And that might be why you're covering everything with it.
Right.
Because
Makes sense.
because otherwise the blue is wool. So if it's raining when you're walking, the wool would get, it would absorb the water, it would get all, and I'm sure it's not great for whatever it's covering. So the tachash would render it waterproof. And if you ask, why would you be concerned about rain? It may not rain every day in this wilderness, but it still rains. And also, we're not talking about a desert necessarily when you imagine sand dunes. We're talking about them traveling through what they call wilderness. And wilderness may have less rain than other areas, but it still does have rain. So I think that is going to be part of the discussion, but we'll go back to
Wonder
it.
if it was a very big fish, a very big animal. I mean,
Right. I've seen some translations that say dolphin.
yeah.
In any case, it was supposed to be a beautiful animal.
Right.
Well-
Multicolored. And I know, so we'll look at the different ones and see. Also, the use of tcheles, again, they call it purple wool,
Yes.
the tcheles. It's, so we'll talk, we've talked a little bit about it before, but that notion that, no, here it's argaman. Here it's talking about argaman. Argaman literally is purple.
Huh.
Argaman is purple. So it doesn't say tcheles, right? Does it say tcheles? You take that and you put it, oh yeah. So in the first ones, it says tcheles. Tcheles is, and then, so in verse 6, it says tcheles. In verse 8, it says, verse 9, it says tcheles. And in verse 12, it says tcheles. But then, but then it says in verse 13, purple, argaman.
Yeah.
Argaman is purple. Tcheles is more, sometimes there are translators that say tcheles is like purple too, but it's, in our experience, it seems to be more like blue. It's compared to the blue of the sea and the blue of the sky. So it's sort of interesting that purple sort of sneaks in there. Okay, we'll see.
Rabbi, these laws which pertain to moving this moving the Mishkan. Do they not get as much interpretation? Because once the temple is built, all this is moot, isn't it?
Yeah, but you know what? They talk about the dimensions and the design. And once the Beit HaMikdash is built, the dimension and the design is also of the Mishkan is going to be moot. And yet they still do talk about it.
Yeah.
because
But the moving part of it, covering it so that we can move it, putting the staves in, that part.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but I'm saying it's not any less. I mean, the dimensions are also never going to be repeated.
Oh,
So
that's, yeah.
of the building itself. So and the design, it's not going to be repeated.
Well, it
It's-
was. No, second temple, and it might be again.
No, not of
Oh.
the Mishkan, not the Mishkan. The Mishkan's design.
Right.
Like
Oh, I see.
The vessels are the
Okay.
same, but not
Yeah.
the actual design of the Mishkan. Also,
Ah.
there's a weird thing that happens with Shiloh. Shiloh was a Mishkan of sorts that existed for 369 years. It existed from shortly after the conquest until Eli's death, and when they take the ark, until the beginning of the prophet Shmuel. So that was a really long time that there was a Mishkan. Now, they do say that it's not your typical Mishkan, that it's a kind of a hybrid. And it's sort of interesting area of study. I noticed it in the Gemara when we were doing this Gemara just like a week or two ago, that it came up, I would say about 2 weeks ago on Daf Yomi. There was a Gemara in which you could tell that there's different rules for different structures. The Mishkan had certain rules. Shiloh seems to have had certain rules, and the Beit HaMikdash has certain rules. And then there were these two places where they had what they call Bama, where they weren't a Mishkan. It's not a Mishkan. It's not the Beit HaMikdash, but it's something like which were called like altars. They're that are called Bama. So there's like 4 different classifications. And then let's say you would compare it to a present day synagogue. So that would add 5. That would add 5 classifications. And it's you'd have all the variables and comparing and contrasting between them. Anyways, okay, all right. So we'll talk
Thank
about
you.
that. All right, be well, guys. All right.
Be well. Bye-bye. Thank you. Good
Bye-bye.
Shabbos.
You're
Talk to you,
welcome.
Lois.
All right. Good job.
Okay. Very good. Bye-bye.